Hi everybody, welcome into the Irish NFL show. It is April the 10th, Sunday night, Sunday evening, Sunday morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Could be after that. If you're listening on our podcast, just search Irish NFL show on your podcast provider. We are presented by Trust Gaming, Mini Arcade Systems, and also the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Tickets go on sale for Nebraska against Northwestern on April the 29th. I can't wait. We're like 4 months away from the kickoff of college football in the Aviva. More information at collegefootballireland.com. Michael McQuaid, Colin Cronin, Brian O'Leary. Boys, it's been 2 months-ish since LA, and I wanted to get one more little bit of nostalgia before it goes out of date. My final Super Bowl Bud Light is about to be opened live on the show. How are we doing? Good?
Very good. Another interesting week in the NFL. Truly, this is the off season that never stops giving. Whether it is trades, whether it is lawsuits, whether it is other sorts of shenanigans regarding Tom Brady and minority ownership, it never ever stops.
I said last week on the show I love April because of the draft. We're getting into that stage of the season where numerous mock drafts, all these permutations, and you think you know what's happening, and you look at all these different variants of how we're going to get players and where they're going to go, and then you see a trade like what comes down the line this week, which we're going to get into now, which is that Eagles-Saints trade, which it's going to change the landscape of what's going to happen in the second round of the draft, as I like to say, where you go from 11 to 20.
Looking forward to the draft. Under 3 weeks now to the draft. We're going to be live on the 28th of April at 11:30 p.m. So bring out the coffee, bring out the Lions, bring out the Punjana, depending on where you are. A superior tea. Brian was talking about that trade. The Eagles agreed to trade picks number 16, 19, and 194 to the Saints in exchange for picks 18, 101, 237, and the 2023 first round pick and 2024 second round pick. Colin, the Eagles and the Saints, what's going on there? Are you wearing your Philly green in badness, or what's the plan here?
To make Brian sick, I think. My God, you're talking Lions. The only thing worse is what the Saints gave up. It makes no sense. Howie is a genius when it comes to acquiring picks. He actually, when it comes to using them, not so much. But certainly, if you're the Eagles, this is exactly what you wanted, right? There is not a QB in this draft that you're going to want to really kind of invest heavily in. You've got Jalen Hurts. You got to the playoffs last year. Why not run it back with Jalen Hurts? You can build around him because you have the draft capital, and then you see what happens in a year's time. If it doesn't work with Jalen Hurts, you can either be super aggressive in terms of either trading for a QB next offseason or moving up in the draft next year. I think the Eagles will be delighted. I think for the Saints, it's an interesting one because there's two kind of trends of thought. One of those, and Brian might talk a bit more about Saints, but one of those is essentially they have looked around the landscape of the NFC and they've said there is nothing to be afraid of here. I mean, we beat the Bucs twice last year. The Bucs have a new head coach, and yeah, Brady might be back, but they've lost a couple of other players. The Rams, sure, that's fine, but why not trade up, get a couple of pieces in, and who knows what might happen. So I still think it's a no. Like, they've given up so much to move up, and the Eagles are still ahead of them. So there's no reason, if they want to get a certain player, that the Eagles can't sell them out and get somebody else. So yeah, it's a little baffling for me from the Saints. I think, yeah, the Eagles will be delighted.
Brian, it reminds me of The Simpsons whenever Principal Skinner and Apu were talking to each other, and Apu is like, "What were you thinking? What were the Saints thinking here?" Because I genuinely cannot see any situation in which I can go, "Oh, I can't understand it." What the hell?
I'm intrigued by the Saints here. I really am, because there's two storylines going around. One of which that they're not resting on their laurels, and before draft night, the in fact won't be even in these two positions. They'll be up in the top 10, and someone might take a step back. And obviously, with the Giants having 2 picks and the Jets having 2 picks in the top 10, they're the most likely outcomes in terms of where they would go and do another trade to get up. And if they do, then I think it'd be realistic that they are going after the quarterback. But I don't think they are going after the quarterback. I'll probably be wrong, and I think we'll be wrong for a lot of things on draft night because it's just a crazy evening. But you look at the wide receivers coming in this draft, and we're going to get into it with one of our guests this evening, Lindsay Jones, the fact that we've seen so many trades this offseason on wide receivers, and the fact is there's so many really good wide receivers coming out throughout the past couple of years, last year and this year. And the likes of Drake London, Garrett Wilson, who are going to be definitely gone in the top 15, 2 wide receivers. Like Colin said it, like the Saints beat the Bucs twice last year. They're looking at it. Brady is coming back, but we know Brady wasn't the player that we've seen over the years. The Saints can be competitive, and they were light on wide receivers last year. Michael Thomas is a storyline in itself. Is he going to come back? If he does, will he be the same player? If they put good wide receivers around Jameis Winston with Kamara there, they could be challenging for the division. So maybe that's in the mindset that they're going to come up. They also need an offensive tackle. There's 4 there in particular. I think 2 could be gone by the time. But there's a guy Cross and there's Penning who was on our show a couple of months ago, who's highly muted to be in that range. So offensive line, wide receiver, puts them in a position to challenge in the division, I think. So it'd be interesting to see. But I'm not sure we're at the end of this storyline because I think we might see the Saints come again and move up again and give those 2 picks to someone else.
The Saints are coming indeed. Let's see what happens over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Obviously, the first round of the draft is on April the 28th or the early hours of April the 29th as well. April 29th, those tickets go on sale for College Football Ireland's game, Northwestern against Nebraska. Almost got that wrong, boys. 4-year, $104 million deal for the Buffalo Bills and wide receiver Stephon Diggs. In a week that we've seen Colin Pat McAfee wrestle at WrestleMania, and whether you like wrestling or not, he was incredible last weekend. In a week that we've seen that there, I mean, Shane McMahon comes to mind with his song "Here Comes the Money, 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 Money." I mean, that's him. I'm delighted for Stephon Diggs because that's his career set in Buffalo, and they've tied him down, Colin.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a friend who is a lifelong wrestling fan and still watches all. And he was absolutely, and he's a purist, and he was apparently blown away by Pat McAfee and how entertaining he was. And certainly the Buffalo Bills will be entertaining. Again, this is another one where I want to see, I suppose, the full breakdown of the deal, because I think they've given him a decent wedge. I think a huge chunk in terms of guarantees, but we really want to see the breakdown in terms of cap hit and stuff like that. Look, Diggs has been brilliant for the Bills since he went there. He really kind of reinvigorated and coupled with Josh Allen, but he is a major threat, and he's super competitive, and I think it shows the kind of Bills' commitment. We know how different it could have been. 13 seconds could have changed everything for them last year. They could have been the ones hoisting a Lombardi. They've now committed Diggs to a long-term deal. They've brought in Vaughn I don't think Vaughn's there for the 6 years, but Vaughn is there for a year or 2. Clearly, they see the Super Bowl window as open despite how competitive the AFC should be. And in a year where we're seeing, a lot of talk, and we discussed it with Lindsay later about the wide receivers getting traded, and a lot of talk around Deebo Samuel. At the time of recording this today, he has removed the 49ers from his Instagram account and talk about AJ Brown. The Bills getting it done with Diggs. I had seen that there were people who said that they wouldn't be able to afford it. Well, they have made it happen.
Yeah, lockdown. Josh Allen now they've locked down. Stephon Diggs, and as Colin alluded to, he's been a revelation since he's got there, and they have a good contingent of wide receivers there. Gabriel Davis, who had that brilliant game in the divisional round with the 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns in fact, and then McKenzie, who's another guy who kind of floats on the radar, who also signed a contract this offseason. So I imagine the Bills are looking at it, and once they've improved on defense, the offensive has always been very explosive. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on in the AFC this offseason with teams signing different players, but the Bills haven't done a lot offensively, and I think they're looking at it from the standpoint of we're really setting away, and if we can play like we did last year, we have a real opportunity. And maybe they'll learn from the mistakes of that 13th-second fiasco and put themselves back in a position. But to see him locked down kind of cements that where they are, and they're in that window, as Colin said, that they're in that situation. We've seen it in the past with the likes of the Chiefs for the double down to come back again and go to the Super Bowl. I think they haven't made the Super Bowl yet, they're a serious contender. I think the fact that they've done this kind of puts it in play that they're going to be there and they're ready to go next season.
Absolutely. It's going to be a really, really interesting time in Buffalo next season, especially when that division is stacked.
Yeah,
I don't know if the AFC East is stacked. Maybe that's a controversial take without talking with Mark here. I know Miami have done some things. I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen there, but it's a lot of money. I'm delighted for Stefan. Will he get a ring to prove even more so? This is a great show this week. We have got the president and CEO of the Green Bay Packers, Mark Murphy, on this week's show. But first off, we're delighted to welcome back Lindsay Jones to the show. Lindsay Jones, obviously senior NFL writer at The Athletic, and it was great to chat to Lindsay, not just about what's been going on in free agency, but numerous different topics. So sit back, folks, enjoy the show, and if you're listening on podcasts, they will go on as separate interviews. But here is Lindsay Jones on the Irish NFL show. This week on the Irish NFL show, we are delighted to welcome back someone that's been in the show before, I think during the off-season last year and also during the season, senior writer of the NFL at The Athletic and also president of the Pro Football Writers, Lindsay Jones. Lindsay, it's a pleasure to have you back on again. A very, very warm welcome back to the Irish NFL show.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's good to see you guys again. I got to see a couple of you guys in person at the Super Bowl, which was awesome. Callum, I think we ran into each other like 100 times over the course of the couple of days.
We did. I didn't get covered in confetti at the end of it though, Lindsay. That was you.
Yeah, we made our way down to the field at the very, late night, well after we had filed and we're waiting to kind of get back on a shuttle bus to leave, and got to go play in the confetti a little bit, which if you don't have the all access pass, you got to wait until the very end when they're no longer enforcing any sort of security rules. And that happened at 11 p.m. or something like that.
Did you do the confetti angels? I think Ryan Harris and Emmanuel Sanders did those after Super Bowl 50.
I don't think I did any angels. I think I just did the Instagram boomerang, throw the confetti in the air.
Well,
I was just happy I was done filing. So.
Oh well, yeah, and enjoying the moment. But it has been a crazy off season, and I suppose there are any number of things we could talk about. But today's story around Brian Flores and the additional two people added to the lawsuit, and now I suppose potentially the extra evidence in terms of the memo that he put together. Just your reaction to today's developments.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of waiting for this over the last week or so. There was a filing deadline for an amended complaint of, I believe it was Sunday. It was going to be on April 10th. So we didn't figure they would be filing anything over the weekend. So we were kind of waiting for it here at the end of the week. And the expectation is that there were going to be additional coaches who were joining, because when Brian Flores initially filed this lawsuit, they set it up that it could be a class action lawsuit. Obviously, it wasn't going to be, it was just one plaintiff, but we were waiting. So the idea was they were confident that there were going to be others, that Brian Flores believes that his experiences, while there are some, specific things that he says he went through, a lot of what he went through, he believes were kind of universal experiences for Black coaches, particularly Black coaches who were in consideration or had been head coaches. So it was kind of just a matter of time of waiting, who else would come forward, because it does take a lot of courage to kind of come out publicly and put your name on something like this and potentially endanger your future job prospects. And so now ultimately 2 other coaches have joined the lawsuit. Steve Wilkes, who was previously the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals for one season in 2018. He was fired after that single season when the Cardinals went 3-13. He is currently a defensive coach with the Carolina Panthers. So he is still employed in the NFL. He actually just took that job this year. Last year, he was the defensive coordinator at the University of Missouri. And then the other coach is Ray Horton, who is a longtime defensive assistant. And he joined the suit because of what the claims are that he basically went through use Brian Flores and his lawyer's terms, a sham interview with the Tennessee Titans in 2016 when they were going through a head coaching search. And a lot of that largely came because Mike Mularkey, who was the man who ended up getting that job, a couple of years ago on a podcast, a podcast that was kind of a fan podcast. It wasn't like very widely distributed or anything, but he was very open and candid and opened up about kind of some of what he had, his coaching career. And when he was asked if he had any regrets, and he said that, the main regret that he could think of was that in 2016, he was told during the hiring process that he was going to be the head coach of the Tennessee Titans and that the interview process was merely a formality. And he was told that before the Titans interviewed any of their diverse candidates. Ray Horton and Terrell Austin both interviewed for that job. So that was pretty compelling information to me because, Mike Mularkey didn't ask to be part of any of this. This was 2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago, that he gave this interview, really had no reason to go out and lie about anything like this. It wasn't part of discovery. This wasn't under subpoena. This is just, him kind of getting something off of his chest that clearly had been bothering him. I think there were a lot of people who in 2020 probably went through some reckoning about their own privilege. And, it was something that he kind of said in a really candid moment, and he has since stood by it. He hasn't further elaborated. He did issue a statement to ESPN today that said, I think you have everything you need. You have my truth. And I don't really have anything else to say about it. So that was kind of the big, that was one big takeaway, is that there are now more people here. And if the ultimate goal for Brian Flores and now these other coaches is to kind of pull the curtain back on the systemic issues of racism that are really baked into the NFL and specifically its hiring practices, the more people you have attaching their names to it, the better. Because what we already saw over the past 2 months with Flores is that, the league and the other teams and a lot of people would try to poke holes in individual pieces of why this part can't be right. And we've heard it with the Broncos, he brought the Broncos into it, right? Where, the Broncos are one of the teams that are named in the suit because of their interview process back in, I believe it was the 2018 or 2019 process, the one that ultimately ended up with the Broncos hiring Vic Fangio. And the Broncos could say, well, that was untrue. We started our meeting at 7:45. He said we were late. We have documentation. So when you can poke holes at individual things, that, makes it a little easier to discount the overall allegations, the overall claims. The more people that come in and say, these are our universal experiences. This is what we're all talking about, what we're all living. That they just keep adding up. And then obviously you alluded to the one other kind of notable piece in there was that Brian Flores is not backing down from the tanking allegations that he made against Stephen Ross. And he said that he issued a memo to senior staff, the general manager, the CFO, and other kind of senior front office people in December of 2019 after this happened, detailing some things about toxic workplace environment, those sorts of things. This isn't what we've learned since in the last few hours, is that the Dolphins weren't caught off guard about this. The Dolphins know about that memo. I believe the Dolphins have actually turned over that memo to NFL investigators. So the Dolphins don't seem to believe it's this smoking gun. So we'll see. I mean, I was at league meetings last week talking to people about this investigation. The Dolphins feel fairly confident that Stephen Ross is going to be exonerated from this, and if there's not, but the longer that Brian Flores keeps it alive, the more troubling it could be for Miami and all of these other teams.
Lindsay, another controversial one of late has been the Deshaun Watson trade, and whilst a lot of anger has been directed at the Browns, obviously because they're the ones who've concluded the deal, for large parts the Falcons, the Saints, and the Panthers, very early on, were all very open to potentially doing the deal. Were you surprised by the openness of these teams to go after, and bearing in mind we really haven't got to the conclusion of the whole saga?
Yeah, I mean, surprised, probably not. I mean, I'm fairly cynical when it comes to the motivations of NFL teams, especially when it comes to players of extreme talent like Deshaun Watson is, particularly quarterbacks and particularly franchises like those, all four of them who are in fairly desperate situations. The Browns were probably the least desperate among them, which made the situation kind of interesting. They at least had a quarterback under contract, and now they're in a real weird situation where they owe Baker Mayfield $18 million or whatever, and there's no trade market for him, so they're kind of in their own mess, but they made that bed. I've been pretty clear on record about how I feel about the decision that the Browns made and these other teams. But yeah, this strictly isn't the Browns operating in a vacuum here. And, one of the things that we kind of came out of the league meetings last week, is that, these other teams are trying to distance themselves. The Falcons particular are, he came to us, we just did a Zoom meeting. It wasn't that serious of an investigation. The Panthers, the team who was in on him first, they probably spent the longest time pursuing Deshaun Watson, like dating back really to last year when they were kind of starting to do their, they use the word homework. I will use that term fairly loosely. Now they're trying to say like, oh, we can't talk about a player who's under contract elsewhere. Well, you know what? You can talk about you should have to talk about your own interactions, but David Tepper has been notably absent and quiet. He hasn't been, really owning up to any of this. But all of those teams, the fact that there were 4 teams actively pursuing Deshaun Watson, made this a bidding war. I mean, they enabled this situation to happen where Deshaun Watson got a record amount of guaranteed money, $230 million, the way the contract was structured. And, he really was able to choose his future. It was kind of a choose your own adventure book. And Deshaun Watson went ahead and picked probably the best team that was looking for him and also the most money. And, if you consider everything that he's still facing, the nature of the allegations, yes, he's not going to be facing criminal charges, and it's, extremely unlikely, if completely impossible, that he'd ultimately end up going to jail about this. He still could be found civilly liable for this, having to pay a lot of money, potentially having to settle these suits, having to fly back and forth to Houston for trials. It's still really messy and really ugly. And other owners and GMs are really angry about the contract, not so much about what it said about their morals, but it's ugly. And
the contract is a game changer.
It is. Yeah. I mean, some of the owners that we've heard from, Steve Biscotti and some of these guys are the ones who are going to have to hand out future quarterback contracts, right? Because it's completely changed the structure here. And, we always talk about, right? Like, when is the NFL going to get guaranteed contracts? It's something that players talk all about, back in 2020 when they were negotiating a new CBA, like, could they get some sort of guaranteed contract structure? And they're never going to get that in the CBA, but really all it takes is kind of a game-changing player contract. And now we have to see if this will be an outlier or if the next group of top-tier quarterbacks will be able to get the same sort of guarantees that Deshaun Watson got.
Lindsay, we said it a bit actually when Kirk Cousins got his deal with the Vikings, the multi-year deal, which was fully guaranteed. So yeah, it's definitely the way the wind is blowing at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the guys who came after Kirk didn't end up getting it for getting guaranteed deals for whatever reason. I think it's still extremely hard to do. They have to basically put the money in escrow. And so that for the Browns, it was like $184 million that they had to pay out like last week. Deshaun's not getting that money tomorrow, but they're having to pay it. So for a lot of teams, like Jerry Jones can put $184 million in escrow. Can the Bengals? Some of these teams that might not be as cash rich as other teams, the ones that are more like family business.
We can use the word cheap as well. We can use the cheap.
Sure. I'll let you editorialize there. That's fine.
Just generally, Lindsay, you started talking about something called an Instagram boomerang, and I must admit, I don't even understand what those words mean. But there are many, many things during free agency I would admit I did not understand. I mean, what the Commanders were doing in terms of Carson Wentz generally and giving up picks for it. Why the Falcons had to do Matt Ryan so dirty along the way. What the Broncos are thinking about Randy Gregory is another one up there. But Christian Kirk and the contract that he got from the Jaguars is probably right at the top of that list.
Yeah.
But we've also then just seen, now Stephon Diggs as this week, obviously, along with Taysom Hill and Devontae Adams, that wide receiver, the prima donna market going up through the roof. Now, that still doesn't justify that Kirk contract, don't get me wrong. But what hasn't made sense to you during free agency? And look, we know the TV money's gone up, but has that wide receiver market really just blown out of all proportions, kind of with other owners now going to have to follow suit to keep their superstars happy?
Yeah, the calculus when it comes to the wide receiver market is really interesting because, so 2 years ago, we had the Deshaun Watson trade and then the new contract. The trade compensation wasn't crazy for DeAndre Hopkins. And that's actually, one of those mind-blowing things that they didn't get a first-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins. And it's probably one of the reasons, of many reasons that Bill O'Brien ended up getting fired. But the Cardinals ended up giving him a very top of the market deal, to the point where it seemed like, at least for the 2020 offseason and the 2021 offseason, that would be an outlier deal, that if wide receivers out there, you weren't going to get up to that Hopkins market. And yes, those were weird off seasons because of COVID and everything, but all of a sudden now, that's the standard, and it's trading picks and then also having to pay the top of the market contract. But the other side of it, to me, that's really interesting is that the guys coming out of college are a lot better. And, I don't want to take anything away from Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and some of these guys who have been incredibly, I think those guys are really, really special and are going to be special players for a long time. But it used to be almost impossible to find one of those guys who'd be able to come in and be not just a rookie of the year candidate, but a legit Pro Bowler / all pro player as a rookie. And now that's becoming a little bit more commonplace. I still think those guys are very rare special talents. But you see some teams that are saying we have to pay top of the market. We have to give up draft assets, first round picks, second round picks, and then pay $100 million to get a Devontae Adams, where other teams are saying, I think we can get value. I think we can get better value. Devontae Adams is really great, but if he's not going to play for us, if he doesn't want to play under the franchise tag and we are up against the cap, we're going to roll the dice that we're going to be able to find a player who might be 80% the player that Devontae Adams was for 25% the cost, or whatever it might be. The Tyreek Hill situation is interesting to me, though, because that was a lot of picks, 5 picks for Tyreek Hill plus the contract, for a guy who, he stayed out of trouble for the last couple of years, to his credit, I guess, but it feels risky. It feels risky to me.
That was very neatly done, Lindsay. That was very neatly done.
It was kind of it was a rough week with the Deshaun Watson and then Tyreek Hill coming kind of boom, boom, back to back, and saying it's just reinforcing what we know, right? Is that NFL teams will pay a premium for talent and overlook a lot of red flags.
Yeah, but don't worry, Lindsay. In October, the NFL will have pink everywhere, and
it'll be fine. Yeah,
it'll be an absolute honor.
Well, and they painted racism in the end zone, so the Brian Flores lawsuit will surely be settled. It's fine. They've solved all these problems.
One thing that I've been, and I know not just the people in this show, Lindsay, but people in Europe have been very thankful for over the last few weeks, is the times that these deals have happened. Devontae Adams happening at 11:25 p.m.
Yeah.
Tom Brady deciding to come back at about 11:20 p.m. Tyreek Hill happening at 3 p.m. I think we were at 4 p.m. We were literally recording when it happened, not live. It's been great. And one thing that just had to not happen, we were all in bed, was the whole situation in Tampa Bay. Bruce Arians going upstairs and Todd Bowles taking over as the head coach down in Tampa. Obviously, Lindsay working with The Athletic, really, really great piece last week on Bruce Arians and the opportunities that he has gave for so many people, and obviously women as well in the league. Could you maybe talk to us just a wee bit more on that? Because it was a great read just whenever I read it just 2 or 3 days ago.
Sure, yeah. We talk so much about the Rooney Rule and diversity and why diversity matters, and Bruce Arians lived it. I think so much of what these policies that they try to put in place, the league is working on, and the Rooney Rule, and mandating that you hire an assistant, a minority assistant coach who will be on the offense, and those sorts of things. That's fine in name or whatever, but if you're not intentional and wanting to do it and committed to not just checking a box to hire somebody so that because the league says that you have to, but if you're intentional for, I want to hire the best people, but with an eye of diversity, because I believe that diversity is important. I believe that my staff is better when we have, coaches of all different ages, coaches of all different racial and ethnic backgrounds, when we have gender diversity. When you truly believe that and are intentional about it, you can see it work, and you can make the argument that you're better and that you can win because you do that. And Arians never did it to he's got a lot of ego, and I know that he liked when Billie Jean King showed up to a game in Tampa and he got praise and stuff for this, but he wasn't doing it so that he could meet Billie Jean King, right? He wasn't doing it so people could call him a champion for women. He was doing it because he thought it made his football team better. And he believed that there were a lot of coaches who were getting overlooked, and he was overlooked for a really long time. He didn't get his first head coaching job until he was 60 years old. And he had a very clear idea of, when I become a head coach, this is what I'm going to do with my staff. And I'm going to make sure there are spots on my staff for people who have been underrepresented or have been overlooked. And that was very much geared toward Black men and towards women. And I actually, when I was at USA Today in 2015, I was out at Cardinals camp the summer when Jen Welter was an intern there. And they had kind of rejected a lot of the interview requests for her. They'd kind of announced in the summer that she was going to be coming on, but they hadn't been allowing her to do any interviews. They wanted to keep it pretty low key. But they granted mine and they let me interview her. So I was the first one who got to talk to her. And I talked to a bunch of guys in the locker room about, what it's like playing for a woman, because in 2015, it was new. There had not been a woman who had coached in the NFL before. And so of course, when Arians decided to retire, and it's just, the landscape has changed so dramatically for women in the NFL, in coaching and front office jobs since 2015, which really was not that long ago, right? I mean, we're not even a decade removed from this, and wanted to just reflect back on a little bit of, how Bruce really opened those doors. And I think I wrote this in the piece that I remember at the time, it felt like it was just creaking the door open just a little bit, right? Just maybe being able to peek inside, but really what it did was it kicked that door open, and it was a wave of women who have followed. There's 5 full-time female coaches in the NFL right now. There have been more than that. It kind of goes in waves, but there are a lot of women working in front office and scouting. I don't think we're very far away from having a female general manager in the NFL. That's coming, female team presidents, those sorts of things. And that's not something that I ever thought was possible. Certainly not 10 years ago, and probably not even 7 or 8 years ago when I met Jen Welter for the first time. So, he was intentional about his staff. He was intentional about the succession plan in place there. He very much believed that Todd Bowles deserved a second chance to be a head coach. He very much believes that Byron Leftwich is going to get a job and deserves a chance, and that's why he has kind of made Byron Leftwich the play caller over the last 2 seasons. And now this is really going to be Byron's offense. There's going to be no question who is running that show, who is working with Tom Brady on everything. So hopefully in 6 months or so, we'll be talking, or I guess it'll be more than 6 months, 9 months or so, we'll be talking about Byron Leftwich getting a job to be a head coach in the NFL.
Yeah, certainly will be interesting to see how things shake out in Tampa. But I suppose, Lindsay, one of the other stories from this offseason, if Howie was as good at drafting as he is at acquiring draft picks, how many Super Bowls would the Eagles have?
Well, he did draft Carson Wentz with one of those draft picks, so maybe I guess that's probably why he hasn't won more. But yeah, I mean, he seems to be really good at fleecing other teams, because it seems so clear that they won that trade this week, to the point that I was when it first came through, I was did that just happen? One, it was a lot of picks and a lot of math and figuring out, okay, well, who's moving where? But it was the value that they were getting from the Saints was great. And the Saints haven't necessarily been great in terms of value. They've been good at drafting. They've hit on a lot of draft picks in recent years, which has kind of helped keep them afloat and in the mix while they're in salary cap hell. But they haven't been known to get great value for the way that they move around the draft board. But yeah, that was an interesting move. And it's clearly one that's looking towards the future and knowing that what this draft class looks like, looking at having a really good understanding, think of your current roster, and that, I'm sure they're looking at their current roster right now, if you're talking about the Eagles, and saying there's no quarterbacks specifically in this draft class that are going to be any better than Jalen Hurts. we owe it to Jalen to give him another shot to do one more year. And then we've positioned ourselves next year that we're going to know if Jalen's our guy or not. And they're one of several teams that's going to be in really good position to make a major quarterback move in the 2023 offseason. And it's just really fun. We're now going on we'll be on 3 or 4 straight years of just ridiculous quarterback movement and quarterback speculation, which is really, really fun. So this year has been weird in ways that I don't think any of us could have predicted a couple of months ago. And then next year, I think between the draft class and then more veteran movement, because that always happens, will be really fun as well.
And do you, for the Saints, do you think it's that there's the two trains of thought, I suppose, some that they're going to go up and move up again and look to get a quarterback, others that maybe they've looked around the NFC and said, there's not a whole lot here, and especially with BA moving on, and they look at what they did to the Bucs last year, and they said, if we can get a couple of guys in here, maybe we can really make a run at this in this conference.
Yeah, I mean, look, well, there's a little bit of a wild card with Jameis Winston because he's coming off of that ACL injury. So when exactly is he going to be ready? But I think you can win with Jameis Winston. I don't know if you can win a Super Bowl with Jameis Winston, but you can be competitive in the NFC South and maybe for a wild card spot. I think the Bucs are very clearly the favorite in that division, but you can get by with Jameis Winston. The thing that I just don't understand, you don't move up like that. You don't trade a first-round pick to move up for anybody but a quarterback. It's an insanely bad business decision, especially when you're moving up into the teens. There's no certainty about what that draft board is going to look like in the mid-teens. So unless you are 100% confident that Malik Willis is going to fall to 15, did they move to 15? Is that where they're at now? But if you're moving up, feeling confident that the offensive tackle that you want is going to be there, or that you're really happy with any 4 different offensive tackles, it just doesn't seem like great value. You shouldn't be giving up future first round picks to move up for anybody who isn't a quarterback. And then the flip side of that, or I guess the other question there is that with these quarterbacks, was it worth moving up to get a quarterback who in most years, or if any of these guys were in last year's class or maybe even next year's class, would any of these guys have a first round grade? Are they just getting artificially bumped up because of what this class looks like? So I don't know. I don't love it for the Saints, but I guess we'll see. We'll see what they do on draft night. But I think I have a hard time seeing what they're going to do that would make me change my opinion on that trade.
Not the first time either. A few years ago, they moved up and everybody assumed they were taking Lamar Jackson, and they took Marcus Davenport.
And I like Marcus Davenport. I went down to San Antonio and did a feature on him. I think he's really interesting. He looks his physically he profiles almost exactly like DeMarcus Ware. I really like him, but you don't move up for Marcus Davenport. As much as you might like him, and he's going to be he's probably going to have a long, productive career. You don't move up for that guy.
And then another set of fans who are a bit kind of confused at the moment, and I spoke to a few of them, is Seahawks fans. They're getting mixed signals. They don't know if it's a full rebuild or if they're kind of middle of the road, because whilst they did the Russell Wilson deal, then they kind of committed to saying we're going to try to get DK Metcalf signed up for a contract. But yet this week, there's a lot of talk that they've said to the Jets, we don't want your 10, but if you give us 4, we'll make the trade. So again, it's just mixed signals coming from the GM. Are they going to rebuild, or where are they going to go from here?
Yeah, it's really rough. When they made the trade for Russell and then Drew Lock being part of that trade, it was I hope they're not done at quarterback. This can't be their only move that they're going to make. You can't realistically go into next season with Drew Lock and I guess Geno Smith.
Drew gets no love on this show.
Lindsay based in Colorado as well.
Are you guys Drew Lock truthers? I'm not sure.
Lindsay, I have my own issues. I'm a Giants fan. I have my own issues at quarterback.
So
you understand. I don't need to be getting involved in the Drew Lock world.
So yeah, it's crazy. But look, I get why the Jets are still calling and trying to, because it's out there now that if you want to go out and get a top receiver, these guys are available. Deebo Samuel is going to be in that mix. I think some teams have been calling Washington about Terry McLaurin. Washington's not interested in moving him, but kind of that next group of guys who are due for a contract. But yeah, I mean, I got asked recently, I don't know if it was a radio hit or something that was which team had the biggest upgrade and which team had the biggest downgrade this year? And it was it's clearly the Broncos and Seahawks just swapping quarterbacks, because I mean, I like Drew Lock, like, as a guy. Like, I think he was in a kind of a tough situation last year. It wasn't always the best situation here for him. But, like, objectively as a player, when he was the full-time starter in 2020, objectively he was one of the worst quarterbacks, if not the worst quarterback, by like every statistical measure. He can make some nice throws. He has like some of his, physical profile's nice. Like, he can scramble well. He can move well out of the pocket and those sorts of things. But like, when it comes to actually watching him try to manage an entire game and function in a full NFL offense, he just hasn't shown that he can do it. And yes, he's had coordinator changes and he had some injuries, but like, I know they're trying to sell it to that Seahawks fan base, and I get what John Schneider and Pete Carroll are trying to do. They felt like they were kind of backed into a corner with Russell Wilson, that he wasn't going to re-sign there long term, and this was the best value they could get from him. But like, trying to sell that as like he's better than he showed, he's better than he played, and like, great. They're not naive. I mean, it's really tough, and like, I've said this about Drew Lock for a long time, even going into the 2020 season and the 2021 season here in Denver, was that like, best case scenario, if every single thing broke right for Josh Allen, best case scenario for Drew Lock was that you could say, we can turn him into Josh Allen. Look at who Josh Allen was as a rookie. Look at who Josh Allen was coming out of college. He was inaccurate, but like, physically, he's really gifted. He's got this big arm and he's a good leader and the guys love it, all that stuff. But like, Josh Allen is probably a unicorn. Like, you're probably not going to replicate what the Bills did with Josh Allen, because Josh Allen worked really hard at it. And then the Bills structurally built around him an offense and then a personnel around him to make him into a good quarterback. It's just really hard for a guy who's inaccurate and who has some mechanical issues or inconsistencies with his footwork, and then poor decision making, which that's Drew's probably biggest problem, right? Is his decision making and his fumbling and turnovers. I just don't know how fixable that is, and I don't know how fixable that is in year. Is this year 4? This can be year 4 for him.
I mean, Lindsay, they just have to fix every part of his game that's involved.
But other than that, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I'm sure it's going to be fine.
I mean, Drew Lock is actually 2 4-letter words, and in fairness, Michael and Colin have often used 4-letter words when talking about Drew Lock from time to time.
But it paid off, Mark, in the end. It paid off, Mark, in the end.
I know, but Michael, you think I give the Broncos a hard time at times. So I just want to say publicly, especially with Lindsay based in Colorado as well, the Broncos have done such an amazing job at upgrading at quarterback, and the moves to get in Russell Wilson are fantastic. Now, if they can just fix the other 52 spots on the roster to get out of the basement in their division, that might be good. But we'll see.
Maybe not 52. Maybe like 15.
No, a good 30. A good 30, Lindsay. Anyway.
Well, I mean, they're playing. The thing about the Russell, before we move on to something else, is like the Russell Wilson trade, like, it energized the city. I mean, people were so depressed when Aaron Rodgers all of a sudden, he announced, and then it was like an hour later. But like, you got Russell Wilson, but you probably still have just the 3rd best quarterback in the division. And that's that's assuming that he's better than Derek Carr consistently. He wasn't necessarily better than Derek Carr at times last season. So that's a huge move, but you're in the best division of football where everybody else, basically except for the Chiefs, has been loading up, but the Chiefs are the one everybody's chasing. So is that one move enough to, I think it makes them a playoff contender for sure, but like, does it get you to that Super Bowl contender range, which is what happened with the Bucs and with the Rams when they went out and made their major quarterback move?
I'm sure that debate might come up on this show once or twice.
A few times, yeah.
Now the season of them. But I was actually, you were calling out the great ban and efforts that Bruce Arians has always made towards diversity, and the efforts he's done in that regard. I always think, and I've called it out a few times in the show, that people overlook what the late great Al Davis did in that regard as well. When you think of Tom Flores and Art Shell, and of course the Princess of Darkness, Amy Trask, CEO there of the Raiders. But it's not normal, really. Let's be honest. The owners in the NFL are called out for any commitment to diversity. One thing that is always called out is they happen to be very, very rich people. I want to do a quick pop quiz, Lindsay. You might have seen this. So I'm going to tease the other guys on this. Who is the richest owner in the NFL, guys?
Oh, I did see this yesterday, so I'm going to abstain.
So, all right, number 3
It's
is
not
Jerry
who you
Jones.
think it's not who
Oh,
you
no,
think.
straight away I was going to say
Number
Jerry
3 is
Jones.
Jerry
no?
Jones. Number 2 is Stan Kroenke, and number 1 is David Tepper of the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have said that, I know. But there was nearly the prettiest, best looking, most attractive, most wonderful, greatest player of all time who was an owner in the NFL, if recent reports are meant to believe. Lindsay, I'm really fascinated, mainly because I want to marry him if he would ever just leave Giselle. Your thoughts on the idea that Tom Brady allegedly was going to become a minority owner in the Dolphins? And this ties back to the whole Stephen Ross, the whole Brian Flores thing, but the minority ownership thing.
Yeah, well, there's a passage in the Brian Flores lawsuit about trying to pursue a veteran quarterback who is not to be named, who would have been breaking NFL rules to do so. And I think you could draw your connections about who that was. One Michigan man looking out for another Michigan man. Well, the Dolphins have had these like celebrity minority limited partners in the past. So this is very much in line with what they've done in the past. It would be very rare for an active player to be involved in something like that. It's the way in. It's the way into like actual like primary ownership. NFL ownership is to become a limited partner. You can gain a lot of wealth that way. It does a lot for your portfolio. It doesn't get you a lot in like name recognition or power. You don't actually get to vote or anything like that. But the way that the NFL's business is running, it will help make you a lot of money. That's how David Tepper was able to buy the Panthers, was that he was a limited partner in the Steelers for a long time. He got to know the NFL business. And then obviously all of his other money that he had. I think his like net worth right now is in like 16 billion or something.
17.9 billion, I believe.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Only like 17.9 billion more than mine is. So a lot of money. But we're at the point now, though, that these NFL franchises are worth so much. And the way that the NFL's ownership rules are, it's a 30%, right? That you can't just do these like massive ownership groups where there's like 40 people. So you hear things that was like Kanye West and Antonio Brown want to buy the Broncos. Cool. Like, how many billions do you have? Like Kanye West, who I'm sure is one of the richest people in America, still doesn't have that kind of money. When you hear things of like, oh, John Elway and Peyton Manning want to buy the Broncos. They don't have that. They don't have that. John Elway has car dealerships up and down out here in Denver, not even close to having that kind of money. So the NFL's at this point right now with the valuation of these franchises that ownership is very exclusive. There are only a handful of people that are wealthy enough to become primary owners. So the way in is to become these limited partnerships. Yeah. We'll see if Tom Brady's interested in doing that at some point, maybe after he retires. I'd watch very closely a guy like Patrick Mahomes at some point. I mean, not to say that he's like going to do anything right away, but he and his now wife, they have limited ownership in the Kansas City Royals and then also in the NWSL Women's Soccer League in Kansas City. So it's kind of this new breed of like NFL star player where he's making his money differently. He's made a ton of money by the time he was 25 and is investing it and is building his portfolio differently that, maybe by the time he's 40 or at the end of his career, he might have that type of wealth and portfolio where, he could have a larger stake in an NFL franchise if he wanted to.
And Lindsay, I was just going to say, the Brady thing is just almost like the celeb power piece.
Yeah.
On it. It's kind of, but I think you're right. Jimmy Haslam, if the Browns, if I remember rightly, he started as a limited owner in something like the Steelers as well, or something.
Yep, I think it was the Steelers. So that's something that I heard last week at the owners' meetings is we're doing a lot of asking around about what's going on with the Broncos ownership and who's going to be in that. And one of those, somebody was like, look at all the limited owners with other teams. And try to figure out like that might be a clue to you as who is bidding. I mean, because there's at least 10 groups that are putting together bids right now, and they're making their way through that. But the people who have a more realistic shot of actually getting in, if they're already a limited partner with another team, that's
And Lindsay, full circle as well. Jerry Richardson was the last active player to be an owner, and obviously passed over the Carolina franchise in less than salubrious circumstances. But now we come back to David Tepper having more money than the five of us put together times several.
But it wasn't enough money to get himself Deshaun Watson, though.
Wasn't enough.
Just finally, Lindsay, and it's for me here. Look, I have to ask you at the owners' meetings last week. One team very openly talked about looking to play in London. Do you think that's a done deal, or have you heard anything about international games this year? Not to focus on one team, but have you any sort of ideas about that, or is that all?
Yeah, who was it who was talking? Sorry,
Joe Ellis was quite vocal about it.
Yeah. Well, because they've kind of been in that mix. So I think they were supposed to be there right in 2020. They were supposed to play the Falcons. Like the Falcons were committed to an international game. Yeah, I mean, I think the Broncos are open to doing it. We should be hearing soon who those international matchups are going to be. I think we know more about who the Mexico games are going to be. I think at this point, I know our Saints reporter has been hearing that the Saints are likely going to be playing one of the London games.
Against the Bengals, apparently, which could be massive. If that does happen, is obviously not confirmed, but there's been big rumors over here about that. So
yeah, so it's doing all the like connecting of the dots of like, okay, which teams want to go, who's playing who's scheduled to play who. They like those cross conference games, but they will do anything. They'll do any sort of matchups. They'll do divisional games. I just hope you guys get some good matches. It's been we keep sending you the worst games, and I feel terrible.
There have been 31, I think, London games. There has never been a London game between two teams with winning records. Ever.
Well, and sometimes they look like when the schedule first comes out, you can talk yourself into it. Like, it's Trevor Lawrence versus Zach Wilson, like the first and second pick of the draft. And then you're like, oh my God, this is the worst game I've ever seen. And God bless you.
Like in April, you don't really know who's going to be having a great season come October. It's difficult.
Yeah. I mean, we know you're going to get the Jags, right? Like the Jags are always going to be there, and hopefully they won't be as much of a disaster and an embarrassment to the sport and the leagues as they were last year. So hopefully for Trevor Lawrence's sake,
we have the
better.
We have the Packers this year. So.
That'll be Hopefully Aaron Rodgers won't be doing something weird.
Oh, he probably will. But I think if the Saints stop their fans from having Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase having a homecoming in Louisiana, I think that's going to be a news story. I think watch the Superdome might need protection, because I would be, if I was a Louisiana resident, I would be very annoyed if the league did that. But Lindsay, you've been so generous with your time. We always enjoy having you on. We always cover such a diverse range of topics. So thank you again. And to our viewers, you can check Lindsay out by Lindsay Jones on Twitter, and also, of course, at The Athletic. Great stuff over there. So thanks, Lindsay. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you guys for having me.
The next guest on the Irish NFL show this week, we've been honoured to have some great guests on over the last few weeks and months, but we are delighted to welcome in the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Green Bay Packers, Mr. Mark Murphy. Mark, it is an honour to have you on the show. Welcome.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Look forward to seeing you this fall in person.
That's it. You know, I have to say, Mark, and I know we're going to get into this maybe just later on in this conversation, I will not forget where I was when I seen the tweet that the Packers were coming to London. I'm not even a Packers fan, and it was that big of a deal, so everyone's really, really excited. You were saying off camera, talking to some Irishmen, have you got any heritage yourself that you want to let us know about?
Yeah, no, my father's family is from, I think, County Cork in Ireland, and I'm ashamed that I've only been to Ireland once. It was probably 5 or 6 years ago. My son and I went on a golfing vacation. We loved it. It was great. Our favorite course was Old Head. If you ever get a chance to play that course, it was so much fun. It was we just loved being in Ireland, and just such a beautiful country.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you got the opportunity to visit County Cork, Mark. That's my home county. So delighted to hear that's where your people are from. And Michael alluded to it there in the opening. Look, wherever you go in the world, whether it's the US, whether it's Europe, whether it's here in Ireland, whether it's South America, wherever you go, the Packers, everybody knows about the Packers, legendary storied franchise, all of the history, Lambeau, Vic Lombardi, etc., etc. For you, when you took on the role in 2007, you obviously knew all about the Packers, but were you aware of the magnitude, and what has it been like, I suppose, for you in the role over the past decade and a bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, obviously, I was familiar with the NFL. You know, having played in Washington for 8 years, and you know, Washington. You know, when I played was one of the best franchises, obviously in the nation's capital. So I had a good feel for it. But I think being here and experiencing it, it's the fan base we have is it's just incredible. You know, and then obviously every team says they have great history and tradition, but it's really hard to match the Packers when you think of 13 championships, and you know, you mentioned Vince Lombardi. I mean, there's so many people that grew up watching Vince Lombardi and the Packers, and we're happy to carry on that tradition. And I think the other thing that's really unique, and until you're here, you don't really appreciate how unique it is, and that's our ownership structure. You know that we're community owned, and we don't have a rich, deep-pocketed owner, but we've got tremendous fan support, and I think you'll see it this fall. Our fans are so excited to be able to travel to London and see the Packers play there. I really looking forward to seeing how they turn out. We travel probably, and actually that's one. There's two reasons that we haven't played a game in London yet. Number one is the economic impact. Green Bay is a small community. I mean, there's about 98,000 people here, and basically the population doubles when we have games. So when we have home games, it's a huge economic impact. So we didn't want to take a home game away from the local economy and the local community. And then the other fact is we travel so well to away games, and our fans travel. And in the NFL now, they have what they call variable pricing. So some games, and usually we're at the highest tier because our fans travel so well that those owners from the teams that are hosting the Packers have a pretty good revenue day. I'll just say that.
Mark, you kind of touched on it there. When Michael said it, when the games were announced every year for the UK, I suppose where I was kind of privy to the information, but the magnitude of the Packers coming, like we saw that opening day when it was confirmed. The amount of Packers fans in Ireland, UK, Europe, both from the States in terms of the reaction of the fans in the States to the fact that you are moving away from Lambeau for one game, and obviously then the fans decided they were were you taken back by I suppose, the popularity and the magnitude of what's actually happened in terms of the Packers coming?
Yeah, I knew we had a strong fan base in Europe, but I'm really getting a feel, and I'm sure when I'm actually over there and see it in person, I'll have a much better feel. But yeah, and you guys know this probably better than I. Our ownership structure, I think, appeals to a lot of fans in Europe because it's common in some of the soccer leagues there, and yeah, and we're just so unique. And the other thing, obviously, we've had some great players over the years, and obviously Brett Favre and now Aaron Rodgers. For our fans, not only in Europe but our fans in the United States, to be able to go see Aaron Rodgers play, the two-time reigning MVP. It's going to be special to see him playing in Tottenham.
Talking about Tottenham, you're talking about a facility that really was built for the NFL. The same contractors are going to try and build this new stadium for the Bills as well. And we were at the games last year, and we have to say now, Mark, the field, obviously, the actual football field, it's incredible, and you're going to love it. And you mentioned Brett Favre there and Aaron Rodgers. You weren't long in your position when Aaron Rodgers took over from Brett Favre, and in a league where many teams are changing quarterbacks every season or every other season, do you take a great sense of achievement in that your franchise has had that consistency at the position now for the space of 20 years?
Yeah, there's no question. I think we're very fortunate to have had back-to-back quarterbacks like that, and I think all the credit goes to our our scouting department, and particularly our general managers, Ted Thompson and now Brian Gutekunst. I give Ted a lot of credit. He drafted Aaron Rodgers when we had Brett Favre, and we had other needs, but he knew for the long term that was best for the organization. And basically, we're ending up with over 30 straight years of elite quarterback play. It's pretty fortunate. And the way the rules are in the NFL now. And you're certainly seeing it with Tom Brady. Quarterbacks, we protect quarterbacks more, so they can really continue to play at a high level much longer than they could have years ago.
Mark,
One thing you mentioned, Tottenham, it's really kind of a small world. I'm going to say 2015, a group of executives from Tottenham came to Lambeau Field, and they were in the process of designing and building their new stadium, and they wanted to see Lambeau Field, and so we spent a couple days showing them around, and we're looking forward to catching up with them and seeing all the great things that they've done. It looks like a spectacular stadium, and I think they looked at Lambeau, some of the fan amenities and fan engagement things that we've done around our stadium. I know they were really interested in, and I'm anxious to see what they've incorporated.
Well, there are plenty of people in Ireland and the UK who have a pilgrimage to Lambeau on their things to do on their bucket list, certainly. But the Packers aren't the only team actually headed over to this side of the world, because the Aer Lingus College Classic is on, and one of your former places, Northwestern, are going to be playing Nebraska here in Dublin in August to kick off the college season. I don't know if you were aware of that.
I am. I'm really excited. That's going to be great. I think it's like the very start of the college season, and Northwestern and Nebraska, and what a great experience for the student athletes, at both schools to be able to play a game there. And for fans to have a Big Ten conference game, right in Dublin will be a lot of fun.
Are you, as an executive in the league? We now have obviously the London games, but the Mexico game, the game in Munich as well. The game is growing around the world. We've seen the league bring in Brett Gosper in order to grow it, and the team. How excited are you about the growth of the game globally?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I think it's crucial for the future of the NFL. There's only so much growth within the United States, and I know there's a passion for our game, especially as people learn the intricacies of the game. think they have a better appreciation of the strategy and the athleticism of our players is tremendous. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it in person. And the other thing that has been a big priority for the league has been, they call the international HMA. I think it's home market area, and so we're kind of studying that. I know a number of teams have started with that, and as you said, I mean, Germany this time for the first time, there'll be a game there. I know the league is looking at a number of different markets to help grow the game.
Mark, we were very fortunate to be at the Super Bowl in LA in February, and I suppose across the world, the Super Bowl is a huge event. I suppose the magnitude and significance of it really comes home when you're actually at the event. And having played in the Super Bowl yourself, in Super Bowl 17, and having an interception to lead Washington to the win, do you ever reflect on your own career because you're so tied up in your own position? Do you ever look at players today and kind of compare it to how it was back when you played?
Yeah, I do sometimes, but obviously it's very different. And the game has grown so much, and particularly the Super Bowl. I mean, it was a big game when I played. I was actually fortunate enough to play in two. My memories are much fonder of the one we won than the one we lost.
That's why I went there, Mark.
And then, obviously, I've been fortunate enough to play in one Super Bowl. The Packers played in 2010. It's just amazing how the game has grown over the years, and but it's great. It's great for the NFL and great exposure for the league. And I think as a player, and now even as an executive, I think you have to be careful. You can't make it too big, if that makes sense. And one of the things, the Super Bowl that I played in was in the 1982 season. I'm really showing my age here, but that was a strike-shortened year. So there was a strike, and I was pretty actively involved in the strike. I was the Redskins player rep, and then I was also vice president of the Players Union. So we were on strike. We only ended up playing 9 regular season games. And so the whole season was just a whirlwind. And I don't think we didn't really have time to think about, oh my gosh, we're going to play in the Super Bowl, because the playoffs were expanded and there was no time off. And normally there's 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl. So we ended up just kind of playing through, and what was really special was the Super Bowl is really great, but hosting a NFC or a conference championship game is pretty special too. So for us, we were able to play our arch rival, the Dallas Cowboys, at RFK Stadium back then. And I'll never forget running out in the field and seeing the fans were jumping up and down, and the stands were going up and down. And it was just an electric atmosphere. And of course, we were fortunate enough to win. When I say we, I played on the Washington Redskins, who are now who became the Washington football team and are now the Washington Commanders. Just a little history lesson for you there.
It's just, it's and obviously with the name as well. We had the good fortune of chatting to Coach Rivera on Super Bowl Sunday, which was fantastic for the show, and it's just great to see the game grow. Yeah, of course. And
a little known fact about Coach Rivera: he is an NFL owner. He owns a share of stock in the Green Bay Packers.
I had no idea.
He kept that to himself.
I always tell him, Ron, you got to come to a shareholder meeting.
I have to. I do have another question, but I have to jump on this international home marketing agreement. I've seen, even just as a fan over the last few weeks, Mark, the Chiefs sending former players to Munich for fan appearances. The Broncos were in Mexico over the last 2 weekends. The potential is just unbelievable. So it's exciting to see what Green Bay is going to do over the next few years. Now, we're not going to, don't worry, we're not going to sit here and say, come to Ireland, come to the UK. But I know it's going to be exciting, and I think it's really, for the international fan, this is the time to be alive to just to be an NFL fan.
Yeah, I should explain. I mean, it's not that we don't want to be part of the international HMA. We just thought it would make sense, take our time, kind of study it, and figure out what are the best markets for the Packers. A lot of it depends. It depends on what numbers you're looking at, but we have pretty good fan bases, and you would know better than I. Certainly in Ireland and England and Germany as well. So kind of studying it, but we'll definitely supportive of the HMA program.
You were talking about consistency, and just my last question from quarterbacks. Another real consistent face for many years was Ted Thompson from 2005 to 2017. Unfortunately, passing away last year. Can you talk to us about your relationship with Ted, both personally and working alongside each other, because he really seen it all in his time in the organization?
Yeah, I tell you, one of the real blessings of my career was that I had a chance to work with Ted Thompson. Just one of the finest people I've ever been around. It was never about Ted. It was always, what's best for the Packers. And just so happy, he accomplished so much in his career. He had a great career as a player. I think he played 10 years for the Houston Oilers, which was a long time ago. But just a tremendous general manager, and really proud, the success he had, particularly winning that Super Bowl in 2010 season.
Mark, as somebody who works in higher education, you have a very impressive educational background, obviously, and just wondering what you feel, how beneficial has you've a law degree, you've an MBA, how beneficial has your education been to you in your career?
Yeah, I think it's been invaluable. I think it certainly has opened up doors. There's no question in any position, particularly a position like I have, you're constantly learning. So my degrees help, but I think once you get into a position, really learning the ins and outs and everything you have to do. But I wish I had the foresight. They do have joint degrees where you can take less time and get an MBA and a law degree together, but it took me a long time. But I got my MBA. I was an economics major undergrad at Colgate, and I wasn't drafted. I wasn't a highly sought after player, so I really didn't. Every year it was kind of first couple of years at least, I wasn't sure whether or not I'd make the team or not. So my second off season, started business school at American University in Washington, D.C. And I was fortunate enough. It took me about 4 years, going mostly in the off season and then maybe one course during the season. And that was before, they didn't have online courses back then, but really glad I did it. And I know some of my teammates looked at me like I was crazy when I was, studying during the season, but I'm really glad I did it. And, in terms of law, what really drove my interest in that was, as I mentioned before, I was actively involved in the Players Association. And I noticed, especially in the collective bargaining process, dealing with lawyers, it seemed like every person involved for the league was a lawyer. And so I thought that a law degree would really be beneficial because I did have an interest in labor relations. And so I was able, when my career ended, went to work with the Players Association and worked at the Players Association. I was Gene Upshaw's, one of his assistant executive directors, and then went to business school at night, or law school at night in Georgetown. So kind of helped me make the transition away from playing the NFL or any professional sport can be challenging. And I think the fact that I was able to kind of pour myself into something after my career ended was helpful.
Mark, from doing our show and obviously being fans of the game, year in, year out now in the NFL, there's very little downtime between the combine, a really crazy free agency this year on trades. We've got the enormity of the draft.
Quarterback movement, it was crazy. It was crazy. Yeah.
Unreal. And it didn't even feel like we'd hit the end of the season and all these trades began to take place. And then we've got the draft and everything that's happened. We've seen this week, Eagles and Saints putting deals together in terms of moving up in the first round. For you,
can you explain to me who won that?
I think the Eagles are.
I hear everybody trying to figure out. I guess it's What's more valuable? Current
we
pick
discussed
or
it last
future
night.
pick?
We discussed it last night. We feel Eagles are looking a lot more long term for a quarterback, and the Saints are obviously looking to build and be competitive within the division.
Sure. Yeah.
I was going to ask what's it like for you this time of year, because obviously the general manager's focusing on the draft, and how different is this time of year for you compared to the season?
Yeah, it's still busy. You know, as you said, it's a year round, and you know, I'm involved not only on the business side but on the football side as well. We had our annual league meeting a couple weeks ago, and you know that takes a lot of time and preparation, getting ready for that, and yeah, and really the downtime. There's not the downtime in the NFL. So our off-season program with our players is going to start up in another week or two, and the draft preparation keeps everybody busy. And then the off-season program usually ends about mid-June. So for people in the NFL, mid-June to mid-July is really kind of the downtime. You know, that's where people take vacations and get away with their families. And because once the season starts, you know, training camp usually starts, you know, third or fourth week in July. It's, you know, kind of nonstop. You know, you're working weekends, and you know, everything's nonstop through hopefully you know, mid-February with the Super Bowl.
Mark, this has been a fantastic chat, and as the sun sets on our interview, including my camera, which the sun just
Yeah,
seems to
you
keep
got
going
the
in
sun
and out.
setting on your in your room.
I don't know what's going on there. Here, we just want to thank you for taking the time, because I know it's obviously a very, very busy time of year, chatting to us and chatting to Packers fans and NFL fans, not just in Ireland but around UK and Europe. And looking forward is an understatement to this game this autumn. We're all playing bingo here, guessing who's going to be playing. So you know, we can't wait for the announcements. And look, safe travels over to London this year, and just all the very best in the next few months. And thank you for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks, guys. I look forward to seeing you this fall.